Hello?
You there, Blastoise Animator. We've got a bone to pick with you.
Who's this? This better not be Frost Prozone or Adult Furry Artist Impersonator that's actually a minor or one of SD's friends. I thought we were chill after the...
No, neither of them. It's Kasper.
How'd you... Is this a prank?
No, this is urgent. Keep me on the line.
Why are you calling me?
Remember the video you made explaining the Firewater Civil War? I'm not a fan.
First of all, I was explaining the storyline I wrote, and if this is because I made it so that you would be killed by a racist...
We're not going meta, Blastoise Animator. We're literally waiting for your directions for part 2 of the 13th Dimension.
I am on a mental health break. I also need to get my driver's license, a real job, and finish commissions I owe from people on Twitter.
I respect that. That's why I want to ask if Marcus and I can explain this lore a little bit better.
Excuse me?
Yeah, we want to share the story of the Firewater Civil War.
Well, by all means, go ahead.
Oh, could we, finish this off? Can we just do the whole thing?
Oh, that would be wonderful. Go crazy, guys.
Thanks, Blastoise.
You can call me Chunky Mouse now.
Hi there, audience. It's me, Kasper Russell Poplar, the Gengar whose soul contains a victim of a racially motivated homicide. Okay, seriously, I don't think any of you all are engaged when our creator explains the lore for your understanding. So, to make this interesting, I invited a friend of mine to help clarify some things.
Okay, so we've already finished the events before the Firewater Civil War, but we're going to tell you the events during the war, using Blastoise Animator's books Fire vs. Water. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story summaries, without us discussing the fact that some of them are due for revision. Kasper, lead the way.
Alright, so Fire vs. Water 1. It's summer of 2020, and an average day for a kid named Joshua Kristoff, and his war turtle, Juno Bartholomew Jr. Joshua works as a clerk in a comic book store, and Juno, he got finished reading a sequel to a comic series that everyone seems to love, and one other person who's excited to read it is a Charmander named Chase. Chase was standing from outside of the store looking for the new comic book to read. He barged in and begged his older brother, a Charmeleon named Hunter, to get it. Hunter doesn't want Chase to make a scene, but Juno curiously asks what is happening.
But their conversation is only poke-speak to humans like Joshua, and his boss barges in hearing the fire-type sounds. It turns out he is not fond of the fire-type Pokemon because of the cult that became a terrorist organization known as the Fire Team. In fact, he is so dedicated to this exclusion that he put up a sign prohibiting fire-type Pokemon, to which Chase ignored. This leads to Joshua and his boss having a heated discussion in the latter's office. While they do, Hunter and Chase leave, but Juno decides to be nice and give Chase the comic book for free.
Chase and Hunter are happy, but as soon as they leave, Joshua comes back announcing that he quit his job. He picks up Juno and heads home, and then he finds Chase and Hunter all alone, reading the comic. They take him home, but Juno is unhappy with how rude Josh's boss was to Hunter and Chase, so he decides to enlist.
Now, during the war, the region decided that captains, admirals, and generals, etc. should almost immediately train whoever volunteers to be a soldier. And based on that training, they find a specific role in whatever team they want to join in. The Pokemon soldiers are mostly defenseless if they came across an armed soldier they're fighting against, but almost effective against the Pokemon of the enemy team. Because of this, there's a specific code where Pokemon can't fight against the humans, but when has that ever stopped the fire team? Now, back to Juno. He failed. It also doesn't help that Joshua is less than the draft age. Now, Juno was expected to go home until he healed an injured soldier, and for some reason, the general of the water team noticed a lack of medical aid for Pokemon, so he decided to recruit him.
Juno is enlisted to the water team, and a majority of the Pokemon there are teenagers. Besides his general, Elijah Johnson, and his Vaporeon Lieutenant General Wyatt Von Aqueous, and Empoleon Captain Neptune, his teammates are a Psyduck named Kenny, a Duon named Frederick, his significant other Brianna named Diana, a Frogadier named Pierre, no relation to the Stunky in the 13th Dimension in Fire vs. Water 5, a Marshtomp named Marshall, a Buizel named Elias, a Sobble with bad anxiety named Hero, and a Crocodile named Charlie, the older brother of Quest. They also seem to know that Juno's trainer saved the Fire-type's life, which the General Elijah Johnson doesn't seem to know.
All General Johnson knows is that the fire team will almost certainly kill the whole team if they keep screwing around, and their irresponsibility is partly responsible for the worst day of their lives. The morning after Juno was enlisted, the fire team attacked the water team by surprise, and during that attack, Kenny, our Psyduck friend, was killed by a grenade. Juno tried to revive him but was unsuccessful. Charlie was begging Juno to save his life, but it was already too late. Juno at first blamed Charlie for Kenny's death, since out of the team, those two were the most immature during the war. But not even a full sentence into his rambling, he sees Charlie crying.
Charlie didn't mean for this to happen. He was close friends with Kenny, because they have the same trainer who is too young to even enlist. He never expected to come home alive without Kenny. Elias, Charlie, Hero, and Juno get together to share short memories of Kenny during the war, and then Juno learned he was a funny guy, just trying to lift spirits up during the war. It seemed it also caused a sense of immaturity for Charlie, who seemed to be entertained to the point where he forgot all about the war.
With the fire team still attacking and slowly getting closer, the general decided to sneak the soldiers away from their current location and trudge their way to a trench. Little did they know that this trench was right in front of where the fire team congregated. Before the next battle, the water team got together and prayed.
The next day they, yet again, wake up from a surprise attack, but on their way out of the trench they discover that the majority of the fire team soldiers are armed with sniper rifles and flare guns. Elias was struck down by a flare gun, but wasn't fatally injured. While the soldiers fight off the snipers and flare gun users and scattered, Juno tried following along, but he gets lost because of all the smoke created by the flares.
Suddenly, Juno was shot below the kneecap, and then he's knocked out from a flare attack. He wakes up with his team hoping he doesn't die since he's the only medic, for the Pokemon at least. The team carry him back to the trench with the general glaring at them unamused, before he walks off with the captain, Neptune. The lieutenant general stays behind with the other soldiers, hoping Juno isn't dead. When Juno clarifies he's okay, everyone leaves but Charlie stays behind, asking for information about medical aid. Juno brought a medical training book along, given by Joshua's mother, and tells Charlie to read from it. Juno also writes a letter to Joshua to update them on the situation. However, it sparks yet another tragic event.
After delivering the letter to Joshua's family, Hunter wrote a letter to Juno wishing him the best and requesting to fight on his team. However, the general saw this, and given his dedication to avoid communicating with fire-type Pokemon for the sake of the war, he treats this as treason. Instead of discharging Juno, he offs himself, which wake up the rest of the soldiers. When they find out, Neptune immediately blames Juno. Juno declares he had nothing to do with it and that Hunter is not an enemy. But this starts an argument between him and the Marshtomp Marshall.
After doing literally anything else, Marshall suddenly lashes out at Juno, saying that he isn't a true, quote-unquote, patriot. He claims that they have to win the war by killing every fire-type Pokemon they come across, but none of the other soldiers are fighting for that reason. In fact, Diana and Frederick were a couple before the war and both enlisted with determination, knowing that either one or both of them would die. Charlie and Kenny were enlisted by their trainer. Elias saw this as an opportunity to leave his parents. Frederick assumed to enlist to do his part like Juno, and Hero, his motives are unknown, but it's implied that he was drafted by General Johnson himself. All this to say is that the Pokemon and the soldiers all came to war with no pure hatred for the fire-type Pokemon, but only the fire team cult. When the rest of the soldiers argued back that they encouraged instead of condemned Juno's actions, Marshall felt betrayed and ran out of the trench, with his trainer following along. When the rest of the soldiers try to stop them, they immediately catch the attention of the fire team, who had been camping out on the battlefield. They gun down Marshall and his trainer, and the next battle commences.
Neptune still thinks Juno is responsible for the general's death, and especially blames him for Marshall and his trainer's death. He's discharged, but Vaporeon Lieutenant General Wyatt Aqueous keeps him on the team, and so he contacted another military branch for aid. Meanwhile, Neptune is forcing the remaining soldiers to keep fighting, and ironically gets sniped, declaring that their aim is bad. The fire team gets closer until a miracle happens.
A helicopter that seems to survive all the flares and bullets deploys soldiers and other Pokemon into the battlefield. They pick up all of the soldiers, including Juno and his allies. The person flying the helicopter is Chester Alcatraz. If you remember, he, his Fullerton wife Carolyn, and their Chesterton son Jack were all exported and shipped out of an Italian region, and into this one thanks to Professor Francisco Poplar. And definitely not by coincidence, meets his son Alcatraz Poplar during the early days of the Firewater Civil War. By March of 2020, Alcatraz Poplar is finally found by military officials and beg him for assistance on how to handle the war. He accepts, and his chestnut, Chester, tags along. And during that time, the chestnut learned how to fly. A helicopter.
So, Chester Alcatraz picks up the remaining soldiers and drops them off at an abandoned high school, which is used as some sort of bunker and military base for the grass team. But don't be confused by the name. Why? Well, you know that the fire team contains mostly fire-type Pokemon, right? And the water team contains water-type Pokemon. Both sides are doing most of the fighting, which gave the war its name, the Fire-Water Civil War. However, we have the grass team, which contains more than just grass-type Pokemon. In fact, many of the military branches operate under the grass team, except for the water team, which appear to have ignored most of the grass team's ideas. I wonder why.
It might be because everyone is so laid back and act like high school and college kids, except they are fed military rations, go through basic training repeatedly, and prepare themselves for war. Speaking of which, the grass team's intervention in that battle ended with a victory for the grass team, but the fire team still refuses to surrender. In fact, both sides of the whole war are almost completely silent, with very little warfare and combat on either side. So, they both take this time to think about how to attack each other by surprise.
As for the soldiers, well, first of all, Juno got healed by a milk tank nurse named Nurse Annabelle. Her milk appears to fix a lot of injuries, but not psychological trauma, unfortunately. After he gets healed, he tells Wyatt Aqueous to drop Hunter. Hunter eventually comes in, passing the training. And just 9 days after his little brother's birthday, we find out that Hunter's duty is espionage. According to cassette tapes recorded by Chester Alcatraz, like 5 months into the war, he suddenly got the idea of fire-type Pokemon sneaking into the fire team's base as spies to gather information, which sounds like that plan should have been considered at the very beginning of the war, but whatever.
Hunter and some fire-type Pokemon are flown on the very late night and super early morning of July 30th and disguise themselves as fire team soldiers. Charlie also tags along disguised as a prisoner of war to sneak past some guards. Once they get to Gabe's office, Hunter stabs his sleeping Pokemon, an Arcanine and a Delphox. Hunter walks in successfully lacing cyanide and other poisonous chemicals in Gabe's coffee mug and waits for him to take a sip.
And once he does, Gabe is down on his knees, then starts crawling until Hunter stabs his back with a machete and leaves to set his room on fire. The spies did tamper with security measures as well as fire alarms for their attack, and miraculously, they don't go off to wake up the teammates or the prisoners locked in. Hunter, Charlie, and the spies immediately run out and are flown back to the base. Mission accomplished. Except by dawn, Gabe's supervisor is called for one last battle with every branch involved, which includes bringing Chester Alcatraz and Professor Alcatraz Poplar. Should be easy considering their leader is dead, right?
Wrong, kinda. Well, you see, when the water team soldiers who fled came back, they realized that neither side moved throughout the time they were gone, meaning they had to go back to the same trench they ran out of. The warfare from both sides is getting harsher by the minute. In fact, this gets so bad that Hero, our Sobble, gets shell-shocked. Juno and Nurse Annabelle wait in the trench for a medical. When it comes, they have to recover some injured soldiers near the building of the fire team's base. When they arrive, they see water-type Pokemon pouring water into as many windows in the building to put out the fire Hunter started overnight and to scare away soldiers hiding. Unfortunately, it caused the building's floors to collapse, as it does, and the water to shoot out all of the windows. Okay, almost all the windows. Nearby soldiers were also drenched and flushed away, including Juno.
Once Juno wakes up, he finds out Hunter had also been flushed away and that the flame on his tail was going out. He sadly dies slowly, and Juno carries his body back to the trench. Alcatraz Poplar was also found dead in the building. Once Chester Alcatraz finds out, he flies his helicopter purposefully into the fire team's building. The battle finally stops.
So now the fire team's base is completely shrouded with trees as a result of seed bombs and other grass-type attacks from the grass team, drenched by water from the water team, and set fire to by the gunfire from all sides. Soldiers are told that the building is too dangerous to enter, and the soldiers decided to destroy the walls that still hold the exterior of the building. As for the water team, all of the soldiers go home, but Juno has to tell Chase the bad news.
By August, the region did a large memorial service near the final battlefield, and during the funerals for the fallen soldiers, Chase leaves due to the grief of losing Hunter. Juno loses track of him, and Chase is missing in action, but the remaining soldiers are still alive and well.
Now, this is the end of Fire vs. Water 1, and the next event that happens is the Starter Rescue series, but we're not ready for that yet. We still need to explain the rest of the Fire vs. Water books in the next video, so stick around and get ready for part 2. If it's ready, it'll be right here. Is it there? I hope it's there. Well, anyway, hope your heads are okay, and I hope you guys can further get this story. This has been Kasper and Marcus, and we'll see you next time when we explain Fire versus Water 2 Eternal Bonds, which is all about Geo.